Hello, everyone. I'm Viviane Mayer of Viviane Art Gallery in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It's super exciting to be here. I'm joined by two wonderful guests, which I'm going to introduce to you in 1 second. So I opened this gallery 8 years ago and moved to the neighborhood of Inglewood in June of 2020. And I'm extremely proud to have this incredible exhibition of works by artist William Kentridge on view until December 19th. What an incredible artist, and such an honor to present him in this little corner of the world and have the conversations that this work tends to spark with the viewers who have come in to see it. William is well known as an incredible collaborator. And for the two people who are joining us in the conversation today, that collaboration has been, I would say, pivotal and supportive in building their careers as well. And I would dare to say that's quite true of William's practice all around. He collaborates with performing artists, visual artists. This is a central part of his practice. And he has engaged many, many talented people in his work in Johannesburg and South Africa and beyond. So joining us today, we have Sbongiseni Khulu, who is an artist and printmaker at the David Kroot Workshop in Johannesburg, South Africa. He's also a founding member of Danger Gavar Ngozi Studio, which I may have just butchered, sorry. That was established in South Africa in 2016. Sbongiseni's eye for detail and recognition as a perfectionist in the workshop are reflected in the projects he's worked on. Most notably, William Kentridge's Triumph and Laments woodcut series, which we are going to have the honor to have Sbongiseni spend some time touring us around the studio in Johannesburg today and talking a little bit more about his involvement in that particular print series. We're also joined by Jillian Ross. Jillian was born and raised in Canada, completed her BFA at the University of Saskatchewan in 2002. From 2003 to 2020, Ross worked in Johannesburg, South Africa in the David Kroot Workshop. In 2006, she began her long-time collaboration with artist William Kentridge, a collaboration that continues today from afar. Among the many print collaborations that Jillian has been involved with, she has most notably worked with Kentridge in creating over 150 editions at David Kroot Workshops, including 3 major bodies of work: the Triumphs and Laments woodcut series, the Universal Archive, and the Nose. And she has now established a brand new print studio, Jillian Ross Print, in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is where she is joining us from today, and is continuing to collaborate with William from Canada. So very exciting to have you both here. Welcome.
Thank you, Viviane.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.
So to start our conversation, I'm going to quickly have Mika tour us around the exhibition. There is also a virtual tour available online on vivianeart.com. So if you feel like she buzzed by something and you wanted a closer look, you can go online and do the virtual tour yourself on our website, okay? But for now, there are basically, I'm gonna let her take that. There are 3 series and a single piece in this exhibition. And the very earliest series is these beautiful etchings from 2007 that I'm going to get Jillian to speak to briefly. I believe these were the very first project you were involved with William, were they not?
They're some of the very first works that we made together. I began working with William in 2006, and when we started with etching. That's the specialty of the David Kroot Workshop. We just over the years have branched out into quite a number of techniques out of interest in whatever projects it is that we're working on. And these particular small etchings were done at the same time as the Nose series was developing. William was working on a project in Rome where the images would be published on the front of the newspaper for 5 consecutive weeks. And each of these little these little etchings were first made as a sketch, then an etching, then a very large drawing. The drawing was what was on view on the newspapers, and this little print series is what developed from I guess this big project and the intimacy then of going into these small etchings. These are done in sugar lift, so it means painting with sugar. And at the time it was condensed milk. And then William also is using dry point, which is scratching straight into the surface of a copper plate. And
Yes,
he's
right.
telling multiple histories, multiple stories that often are not told. They bring people's attention kind of to what's in the newspaper. When this one's particularly is called Newspaper Unread. And there's one that says Newspaper Read. Once you've folded it up and you've scratched everything out.
This one. Yes. And in Newspaper Unread, 2 of the more figurative images that are in the series, the earth on stilt legs and the earth with the gas mask on, were also on that newspaper page.
I think there might be a little nose in there as well to tribute the nose series that we were making in studio. It's in the bottom, in the middle. So you see there's—
Oh, there, yes, there. Yeah, I see it.
there's always these little references. And
Yes.
as we made the nose series, I think at the same time, we made all of these plates and 6 pieces for the nose, and then also a self-portrait and a still life at the same time. So we are always making multiple projects at once. It's absolutely invigorating, and all different sizes. And then we see them. So from the technical point of view, we start with one little series and then we see them develop across all of the multiple facets that William works in.
I'm wandering over to now one of the most recent series that have been created. So that series of etchings was from 2007. And these images, these photogravure prints titled Studio Life, this series of 6 pieces are from 2021. Can you just touch on these as well?
As William often works in his own studio on charcoal drawings, on charcoal animated films, on sculptures, on, I don't know, almost any number of techniques all at one time. This COVID 2020 saw William working in his studio alone. Like many artists, like many of us, we were all working on our own, and William started to develop a new film series. So it is yet to be released. These works are hot off the press, and this has everything to do with the new Studio Life series that documents William's working practice in the studio in Johannesburg. So what we as collaborators, and myself since 2006, and Sbongiseni for the last 6, 7, 8 years, we're witness, privy to watching all of this develop. And so what the Studio Life series enabled us to do was, in a time when we couldn't work collaboratively, because that's the only way we know, working side by side, we had to problem solve, and we had to think of a new way of working together. I was in Canada, David Crute workshops in Johannesburg, William's in his home studio. At David Crute workshop, we don't specialize in photogravure, but there's another studio in Cape Town that does. So master printer Jean Warren made the plates. William took the photographs in his studio. Some are from his cell phone, document what he was working on in the studio. And then others are photographs taken of William working in the studio. So I was really excited to be able to, I worked with all of the teams from here in Canada to develop this series that continues into 2021, and on view right now are 6 of the works, and that series just continues.
And within the series, so we just looked at the 4 that are William in his studio among his own drawings. And now we're looking at 2 that are perhaps a little more personal, one being the Phillips room. The other a double portrait of William's mother and her granddaughter, I believe. Is this unusual for William to have such personal content in his work?
No, it's not. These are moments that come straight from William. William's mother often features actually in his work. We did a line cut of William with his mother in 2010. It's the same portrait of his mom. She comes up in multiple drawings and in Other Faces, his charcoal animated film from 2010. And then what's so beautiful here, and is quite a reflective moment, is that that's William's mother, Felicia, meeting William's granddaughter, Ida, who William only met when she was 6 months old due to the travel ban during COVID. And on the right-hand side, it's also a tribute, because in the background is a charcoal drawing from William's next film that was charcoal animated film that was released in 2020, City Deep. And it's all about the failing mining industry in South Africa and the collapse of the Johannesburg Art Gallery. So that's a charcoal drawing from the film City Deep in the background, and in the foreground on the table is a still life that features the same characters that are behind me here. Form part,
in 8 vessels.
Yes, they form part of the next body of work, the next film series, which is Studio Life, that's still currently in production. They are a set of 1 hour long films, and currently they're filming the eighth episode in the series. And
Mika did spend some time on the video with William setting up that still life.
Yes.
With the vessels, many of which were made out of paper, which is so playful and wonderful. So that is our exhibition, with the exception of the piece behind me, which is one of the Triumph and Laments woodcut series, Lampedusa, and 8 vessels, which is just beside it. But I think it's better to talk about those pieces, both in the Johannesburg studio and the Saskatoon studio. So Sbongiseni, if we could start with you, would you mind showing us around a little bit the David Kroot space in Johannesburg where you work, and talking a little bit more, and I'll ask you questions as we go. I'm sure Jill will jump in, because she was very hands-on with this project with you, I know.
Definitely, yeah.
I'm gonna pass the floor over to you, if you could just host us in Johannesburg.
Yes, so give you a brief tour, but first, what's happening behind me is basically the.
There you go.
So these are the 5th and 6th in the series, the Triumphs and Laments, the woodcuts. And here we have where it all started, Mentenya. And right next to it would be the woodcuts. And of course, you notice that it's in reverse.
Right.
Because it ends up being a stamp from which we print everything. So this basically was our first introduction to what woodcuts would be for myself, Chad, Nathaniel, and all the other carvers that were involved. I'm sure Jill had many experiences in the past, but she had no trouble throwing us in the deep end and seeing how well we swim.
So I understand that to make woodcuts at this scale requires multiple pieces of wood, multiple pieces of paper.
Oh,
Can
yes.
you talk a little bit about that?
Take, for instance, Lampedusa. I've put the woodcuts as best as I can to try and emulate their assembly. That's how many blocks. More or less the same number of blocks as you would see the number of sheets that make up the image.
Yeah.
But each,
Never have any problem jumping on top of the tables, moving
oh
everything.
no, oh no, that's all right. And each block is an accumulation of different types of woods because they all have a certain aesthetic to them, given the wood grain and the hardness of the wood. And here you see the very early test that we did trying to understand that wood grain and how best to kind of manipulate to get the desired effects to kind of suit William's intention, pretty much. At first, the veneering that we tried was a bit too shallow, so it hindered the carving. And we ended up going with a much thicker alternative, which just meant that outsourcing was necessary, which is pretty much what Jill touched on earlier with the photogravures, that even though we don't necessarily know how to do the plates ourselves, there's always someone that we could, get in contact with and make sure that that happens.
Mm-hmm. The printmakers are wonderful collaborators, it would appear, like that you tap into different skill sets. And how, for people who don't understand, because they'll look at the work and say, but it says it's a William Kentridge, but it sounds like lots of other people made it. How does this start? Like, how do you transcribe William's drawing into the print? Either of you can answer that.
Yeah, so just to jump in, I'm sure you're going to go in depth, but from my perspective, it's still his intellectual property. Regardless of how many hands go into making the work, our purpose as printmakers, or how I view it anyway, is I'm here to try and fulfill the work's best possible version of itself. Like, if I can help in any way to make sure that the work achieves its goal, it doesn't matter how many people, how my interaction with it is, what am I trying to say? Now I've lost my train of thought. Basically,
William's mark. You are just
yes.
That can get
as much as
thank you.
As much as it is our hands that are carving it, we are carving it with his words in our heads telling us, don't use these tools because they give this mark, rather use these tools. Please follow this drawing in terms of a schematic of how to carve. Let's go to Mantegna because you can clearly see it there. So there were directional marks in how we carved the image, and all of those directional marks came from William's drawing and what he intended the work to look like.
Yes.
In the first one, more or less, you could see where we tried just doing our own thing, and it ended up looking a bit weird. This was the first block that we ever carved, and it kind of shows because it doesn't have the same level of intention as the rest of the image and the series.
Yes. And William is very hands-on in the space as well. His actual studio, that Studio Life was shot in, is right next door, isn't it?
His sculpture theater studio is downtown Johannesburg, right next door to this studio. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Do you want to add anything, Jill, to Sbongiseni's description?
What the one part that I did want to add is that a lot of collaborative printmaking projects, if they are done on behalf of having the technical skill and the idea, and often what's been so wonderful, especially about being able to work on some of William's projects, is that they reference something that's in the public that people can see later, and then they can start to understand kind of the thinking behind the projects. When we're introduced to them, we're introduced to these projects he's working on overseas quite slowly. So over time, and then we have these enormous studios of which to work. And so the projects can evolve into something that the artist wouldn't be able to make on his own. Yes. So having collaborative print studios, we are technical support to enable additions to be made. These particular woodcuts especially, some of them are made from 20 pieces. The last one is made from 5 or so many sheets of paper. The refugees, the first one that Sbongiseni showed us today. And if you think of how many hands it has to pass through in order to make such giant pieces of work exist, that's what these studios are about. And each of us learns from each other, and ideas develop over the course of working together, over the experience of doing that, over trust, over conversation, over mistakes.
And Sbongiseni is showing us the map right now for the actual assembly of those multiple pieces for, is this Lampedusa?
Yes, it is. The blocks were for Lampedusa and the map as well.
And Lampedusa has 28 pieces, yes? Right, Jill?
Right.
Yeah. Can you touch just a little bit, either of you, on the actual series, Triumphs and Laments, and its origin?
Happily. The Triumphs and Laments, origin of the series was a project that William's done along the river, the Tiber River in Rome. And the project idea began, I believe, in the early 2000s and was realized in 2016. And it is 12-meter high drawings, I say, along the Tiber River. They run 550 meters in between two bridges along the Tiber River, and they were erected by putting up a stencil and sandblasting the wall clean around the stencil. So there's a patina that's on the wall that exists from soot, pollution, etc., that he cleaned away, that he erased away. So these works are ephemeral and are fading, and in fact are actually now gone. And these large-scale works, when we were conceiving of the idea, William said he wanted to do woodcut to reference the patina along the Tiber River. And then, so that's why the woodcut. And they, from afar, should be seen as black and white, and up close, you get drawn into the wood grain. And so it celebrates the triumphs of Rome and the laments. So whenever there's a triumph or a victor, there is also someone who is on the reciprocal end, who, I can't think of the word. You have the triumph and the lament. So you have the victor and the, is that what I'm looking for?
I mean, it's the person who perhaps suffers or has loss or struggle in the whole scenario. And in the case of Lampedusa, it's the image of a widow who is bent forward in grief after losing her husband on a refugee ship off the coast of Lampedusa. So this is one example, but each image has its own story. And in the case of refugees, we know they exist because there are dominating forces wherever they are from that are triumphant, aren't they? And then there are the people on the other end of that teeter-totter, if one could say. Anyway, is that fair? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that when I look at the series, especially of the 6 that we completed, there are a few other images from the Tiber River frieze that were created in etching as well, in a different studio. But the particular 6 that we made here, the majority are not the victors. So, and one of them is simply titled "That Which We Do Not Remember," and it's a black square. And it came up as one of the pieces that William didn't plan to put along the Tiber River wall as part of the frieze. There was one big black square, and instead he just put up "Quello che non ricordo," which means that which I do not remember. We do not remember, because it's collective. So it's on how we erase history, how we think of it in one way and not the other, how we think of the victories, the triumphs, but we don't think of those that are losing. I don't like the word losers either. It's wrong, but it's on these collective histories. And also it was on the wall along the Tiber River, telling the history of Rome, but also the history of so many people.
Yes.
So many places.
Our histories speak to each other, don't they? Like it's really kind of naive to think about Canada and North America in the absence of considering the histories of other parts of the world, because we have our own reflections of them here. Yeah. Okay. As you were speaking, I couldn't help but think that over the course of the last 2 years, you moved back to Canada in 2020 in March because of COVID-19 with your South African partner and 2 children. So you came back home to Canada, and I would expect there are some really wonderful things that have happened and some wonderful benefits to that. But as I see the 2 of you banter back and forth, I also am aware of tremendous loss on your part to leave this space of collaboration in Johannesburg and go to Saskatoon, sorry. But this is real. I mean, when we talk about triumphs and laments, we all have our own triumphs and laments too. You have really risen triumphant, as I see it, in finding a way to continue to collaborate and work from afar, and building this beautiful new studio in your home in Saskatoon, and continuing to bring William's work to Canada and other parts of the world. So I'm wondering if we could move to your space and you could talk a little bit about 8 Vessels, which is the beautiful photograph of your work that you have right behind you. I have heard you talk about the back and forth with William through this whole process of making prints all the way in Alberta, Canada, of his work from Johannesburg, and the text exchanges and the back and forth. And you have a very special relationship.
Absolutely. Sorry, I get quite emotional. I had the pleasure of running that studio in Johannesburg for almost 16 years. I still have that pleasure of working with all of these amazing people because of the way in which we work and the way in which we support each other. And the difference, what I realized, somebody made a funny remark once upon a time that said, for those woodcuts especially, we had to make instructions manuals. And they said, well, maybe you should travel with the work and make them. And I said, okay, never really thought about it, but here I am. And what happens in the printmaking studio is that you have roles, and those roles need to change over time. And so when my role in the studio, I work with everybody and I was managing all of these projects, working with William, I get to see everything. You're involved in all parts of it. But there's the conceptualizing of a work, there's a collaboration with the artist, there's a collaboration with the team, and then it's allowing people a way in and a way to grow. That is what I have been taught by both David Crute and William on how to collaborate and how to share skills, how to enable everybody else. Same with Sbongiseni. Sbongiseni, when in my absence, we worked over WhatsApp so that he could
Literally,
literally every day for hours. We were speaking to each other, and then he becomes an extension of my hand and what I was doing, because you cannot, there are too many pieces in these puzzles. You can't do it all yourself. Mm-hmm. And so the teams of people enable a project that you never thought possible. So the extension, just instead of it being in Johannesburg, it moved into different realms, into Cape Town, Johannesburg, Williams Studio, then to the University of Alberta here. This is where I'm from. I'm with my family. I need to be here sometimes too. And I have always thought with this, the back and forth, but I also am here to provide a new space for learning. So I didn't know, I know about photography here, but I didn't know the intricacies of the medium. And so while I'm here, we found Stephen Dixon at the University of Alberta, who has been working in photography for over 20 years on his own work, but they don't work in a collaborative nature with artists necessarily all the time at the University of Alberta. So when we approached Stephen during COVID, same thing, we were allowed 5 days in the studio to make a piece of work of William's. And William said, okay, well, the Studio Life series is now developing in South Africa. Can you make larger works there? Can we do photogravure large? And I said, well, we'll try, because that's what we do as printmakers. We always find a way. And so the work of 8 Vessels kind of, it moves from the piece, the Triumphs and Laments series of made from multiple parts and the layers into a 4-plate photogravure print, because you can't go very large with photogravure. Just in the intricacies of the technique itself, it takes hours and hours to make 1 plate. And you have to, the bigger they are, the harder it is to move the plates, the paper, the bats, everything must get bigger. So we are making this out of 4 pieces. They all overlap. They're all sitting behind me here, much the same way as Sbongiseni just took you through the studio at DKW. We lay it out all around us. We live with them. And then we slowly start to see how the work evolves. And then we enable another series of printers. And in this case, I'm editioning all of this myself in my small basement studio. And that's why Jillian Ross Print was set up in a small studio so that I could work from home. And then I travel to work at the University of Alberta in Edmonton with now 3 technicians I'm working with there that I do hope Sbongiseni gets the chance to meet and to work with. And that is
I want it all.
We're gonna bring you to Canada in the middle of winter.
Okay, wait. We can talk about this. Logistics can be analyzed right now. I'm not agreeing to anything. But just to jump in, Joe, I found it interesting because, like, as much as I understand, like, the conception of projects and carving and like the passing of hands, it's interesting how you're saying also that the family dynamic has always been somewhat challenging to balance with print. But I found that with Mentenia, literally that became the start of our family in a way because of the tight deadline that we had to. Mentenia was literally started and finished in a month. And that meant like considerable amounts of hours carving, printing,
working together,
seeing how they're literally working together, even spending Easter weekend together. We family.
Yes.
That as well. It never, we said the other day that we couldn't believe that we've only been working together since 2015. See, to me, you've been there forever. So the difference is the closeness. Yeah. And it's much the same in working with William and his entire studio and the extensions. So the Workhorse Bronze Foundry, that extension, Chris Waldo de Vet next door. You have all of William's wonderful people working in his studio that you grow, you nurture, you learn. And it's the same printmaking. William works through printmaking. It's not something that comes secondary. So there's the one small film that's on your show, Viviane, mostly because it has everything to do with 8 Vessels. And it's a 1-minute clip from the Center for the Less Good Idea, which is just down the corridor from Sbongiseni, where he is now in Johannesburg, which I can talk about in 1 second, but that short film was launched on Instagram as a project during COVID called The Long Minute. And it was just sharing what William was working on. And if you follow the Center for the Less Good Idea, you actually get to see small snippets from this brand new series evolving. And then you get to see small snippets of every one of the collaborative performers that are working at the Center for the Less Good Idea at Arts on Main, next to both William's studio, David Crute Workshop. And it's a center that it allows for the performing arts. It is a nurturing space where William is working directly with any number of different people on any given day. And it opens itself up as a theater twice a year. They're called seasons. And so they take over the whole of Arts on Main, which is a 2-story building with artist studios within, a courtyard on the outside with a restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. Wonderfully vibrant space, very difficult during COVID, but very alive within. There are so many people and going all of the time working on so many different projects that then the hopes, or not even the hopes, quite a number of them go overseas and are performing in William's operatic projects. They're performing in some of his, any given number of places. It's phenomenal.
With the performance for The Wall, were there any connections there? Because I remember there was
performers, and quite a number of them came from South Africa. Some of the opera singers were all there, and and then a number of volunteers also in Rome, because it's just too many people to travel.
Wow. Yeah, he brings a lot of energy and mentorship to his work, doesn't he? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like we've reached a natural point to wrap up. So I wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to both of you for being so open and sharing a little bit about your work with William and with each other. And these are really important pieces, and they'll be on view here only until December 19th, but they'll certainly be available through the gallery longer than that for people who might be interested in collecting some of William's work. We're going to put links at the end of this conversation recording for Jillian Ross print and for the David Crute workshop, as well as Viviane Art Gallery. And we encourage people who have been engaged by this conversation to do a little more research into these wonderful entities that have been collaborating on this one exhibition in Calgary, but on many, many, many more things yet to come. So thank you.
Thank you.